Moving on to Iran, where there has been no let-up in the anti-government protests that have been sweeping the country. The death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini after being arrested by the morality police has sparked the biggest public challenge to Iran's clerical leaders in over a decade. Dozens of protesters have been killed by security forces, all for demanding basic rights. Their defiance in the face of the brutal crackdown is being met with solidarity around the world.
These university students in Iran are chanting, "Women, life and freedom." It's a slogan that's touching the hearts of many worldwide, including members of the European Parliament.
The hands of the regime of the mullahs in Iran is stained with blood. Neither history nor Allah or God Almighty will forgive you for the crimes against humanity that you're committing against your own citizens. Until the women of Iran are free, we are going to stand with you. Jian, Azadi, women, life, freedom.
French stars like Juliette Binoche are also extending their support with this symbolic act. In Iran, the clerical leadership says Western enemies are behind the anti-government demonstrations. These people have taken to the streets to support Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khomeini and the country's strict dress code.
Hijab was the excuse of our enemies to destroy our unity. The US and Israel are the root of all this unrest. Just because they cannot fight us, they are trying to attack us by creating internal problems.
But the anti-government protests in Iran show no sign of letting up 4 weeks on. This latest video posted online appears to show female students heckling a member of Iran's Basij force. The much-feared paramilitary organization is blamed for the violent crackdown on the demonstrations. The death of Mahsa Amini has clearly exposed the fault lines that exist in the Islamic country and Tehran's willingness to brutally crush any opposition that challenges its power.
Let's bring in Azadeh Pourzan. She's a human rights researcher and writer focused on Iran. Ms. Pourzan, welcome to the day. You have extensively studied women's rights movements in Iran. In that context, where do you place the current protests?
Yes, thank you. I think that women's rights movement in Iran basically is over 100 years old. So I see the movements that we see today on the streets, the protests, as a continuation of many years of resistance and struggling against the discriminatory policies of the Islamic Republic, but also a continuation of the protest movements against the government and its violation of multiplicity of rights that we've seen in terms of protests since 2017, 2018. In terms of women's participation, you see women in many protests in contemporary Iran, and quite actively so. But I think in it being so gendered this time, and women's rights not only being about women's rights, but being so intertwined with the political grievances and political demands of an entire nation is unique. So, for example, in the revolution, women were present in the street, the revolution of 1979, but many say that there were no such gendered demands from the previous government in Iran.
Would you say that women taking the lead in this protest movement is a sign of a greater shift in Iranian society?
I think that women taking the lead in this protest is a sign of the Iranian people's maturity. So women and the Iranian people that have reached the point that they do not think that freedom is attainable without women's rights and women's feeling dignified in Iran, and that women's rights is not attainable under the current regime, under the Islamic Republic. So therefore, women's rights and freedom and along with it, a series of other rights, socioeconomic and civil political rights, have come together on the street with women at the center of it, demanding for essentially what I think is a better future, a more dignified future, and also highlighting here the role of the youth alongside women.
It is very dangerous for those participating in the protest to publicly talk about their part in the movement and the repression they've suffered at the hands of the authorities. You're in Portugal, but I bet you're in touch with a lot of people back home. Would you mind telling us what you're hearing from friends and activists in Iran?
Yes, what I am mostly in awe of is the ordinary people who before, and for example, on my social media, I've never seen them putting anything political, remotely political. Even posting, for example, like a letter that they have received from the court to attend as a result of having attended the protest, or very bluntly, posting anti-government slogans and so on whenever they have access to the very limited internet. Activists in particular are in a very difficult situation because the Iranian regime is not only arresting people who are on the streets, they're actually going after people that they consider maybe influential in the expansion of these protests, so whether they're journalists, authors, activists, and so on, and they arrest them from home. So, for example, I know a few activists personally who are currently in jail and nobody knows of their exact whereabouts.
This is currently a leaderless movement. Is that an advantage or a disadvantage?
I would say it's yet to be seen, but it has its pros and cons. What I think is so hopeful about this movement is that it's so grassroots. It's so organic, and I think that's what makes it very powerful, very collective in a way. In terms of it not having a leader, my worry is because of the very systematic and systemic repression and the violence of the Islamic republics against the people, against the protesters, the use of lethal force even. If there was a leader, maybe there could be more strategy on what's next. But at the same time, I feel that we have to trust those incredible young leaders on the ground and just trust that they're very strategic about what they're doing and that they know better than us what their next moves will be, and to honor and respect whatever it is that they will do next. For example, they have taken the protest onto strikes. I think there is a lot of wisdom behind that, and that's leadership. It just may not be individual-based leadership. It's more like a collective, grassroots-level leadership.
How important is it for this grassroots movement that it be covered by the media around the world?
I think it's critical. It's absolutely critical because the way I talk about it is that why is the Islamic Republic shutting down the internet, restricting the internet so seriously and so severely every time there is a protest in recent years in Iran? Because they don't want the world to know. Because they want to be able to kill people without the world knowing about it. And so they don't want the world to watch. And when the world watches, I think it does, in the long run, give some level of protection to the individuals who are risking their lives. At least there is a little bit of a fear then in the Islamic Republic that, that what they're doing will have consequences. But also, Iranian women, youth, and Iranian people really want to be heard by the world because they don't think that they're going to ever be heard by their own government. And so if the world hears it, perhaps places like the UN and other multilateral organizations, countries like Germany, could think more seriously about holding the Islamic Republic accountable for its atrocities.
Human rights researcher Azadeh Pourzand on the protest in Iran. Thanks a lot.